Okay, after a long time in general, but also a long time with Pirkei Avos, we're back to Pirkei Avos. We may actually not be on this mishnah. We may be on the mishnah before this. I don't think I ended up giving a shiur on the previous mishnah because I had a wedding that I was not able that ran a little late. So I owe you a shiur on that, bli netter, but I just wanted to move on to something new. So we have a very short mishnah tonight. And this is one of the mishnahs, I think I wrote this in the description, where the Mefarshim all say similar things, but with slight nuances that make me wonder, are they really saying really different things? So I really focus mainly on Rashi, who I don't usually go this deep on, but that's what I have prepared. And then we'll see where the rest of it takes us. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Heve Zahir Batalmud, Sheshigagas Talmud Ola Zadon. Now, I think I translated this in the shiur description, but would anyone like to try to translate this? Yeah, go ahead, Tamar.
I do kind of remember the title, but okay, so Rabbi Yehuda says you should be careful with Talmud.
Yep. Oops,
because a mistake in Talmud is considered intentional.
Yep, because a mistake in Talmud is considered intentional. Okay, right. Oop, that's not how you spell intentional. Intentional. Okay, so yeah, that's basically it. You could translate as mistake as unintentional mistake if you want to be clear, but I think all mistakes are intentional, so I think mistake is fine. And then in Zadon, intentional, deliberate, purposeful, whatever word. I would say intentional. So we'll not get caught up in those nuances unless we need to. Okay, what are the questions here? Yeah, Tamar?
What is Talmud referring to?
Yeah. So what is Talmud? Now, let's just do a literal translation of Talmud. What's the literal translation?
Learning?
Yeah, so I'm of two minds about this, okay? Because yeah, it comes from obviously from Lamed Mem Daled. So learning is one. Anyone have other translations that they say?
Teaching? Could it be teaching?
Okay, yeah, okay, right. So I'll give you my my little spiel on this here, okay, which is I don't even know if this is a good proof. Actually, I don't even know if hold on, I did not prepare this, but let's see if this is what I remember it being. I'm looking in the Sefer Mitzvos. I think this is mitzvah number, is it 11 or is it no, I'm is it 11? I want to say it's 11. But maybe I'm mistaking it. Yeah. Yeah, here we go. This is the Rambam in Sefer Mitzvos, Mitzvos say number 11. He hatzivu shnitztavinu I think it's supposed to be Lilmod Chachmas HaTorah Ula Lamda. This is the commandment that we have been commanded to learn the wisdom of Torah and to teach it. The Zehu HaNikra Talmud Torah. And this is called Talmud Torah. So the way I read that is Talmud Torah means learning and teaching Torah. Okay. So so learning learning teaching learning and teaching. Okay. Is there a good English word that encompasses both learning and teaching? I think there is one, but I don't think it has the right connotation.
Is it educate?
Yeah, education, right? Which I think like we use for teaching and learning, right? Like you say, for example, I'm majoring in education. You don't mean that you're majoring in learning, even though you should. And we say also that like I'm doing it for my own education, you mean learning, so there's teaching and learning, but it's just for some reason education sounds too formal, or too stiff. So just we'll realize like that's literally what it means. Okay, so the question is here, what is Talmud in this context? Okay, is this a generic term for the activity of Torah study, Torah education? Or is it a specific type of learning of Torah study? Okay. And I'll leave it at that without answering. I'll give you the opportunity to answer later on. Okay. But yeah. That's a primary question. Okay, what else? Yeah, Lauren?
Shigigas mean? Like I know it's like a mistake, but I know there's different kinds of mistakes. So
Right.
maybe like what kind of mistake
Right. So
is
what
this?
does shogig mean in this context? Right? What kind of mistake? Yeah, Fega?
How can a mistake be considered intentional?
Okay, that is the major question. Okay, how can a shogig be considered mazid? Mazid, right? Uh, if it's unintentional, then it can't be intentional. So that's going to be a major question. Yeah, Fega?
Is there something that's specific to Talmud, like as opposed to other mitzvos or
That's a good
activities
question
that
also,
someone can
right.
do?
Why focus? I'm actually going to put this on right after the Talmud question. Is this statement exclusively applicable to Talmud as opposed to other mitzvos? Or is he just emphasizing it? You know, like for example, if you had a statement, be careful with tzitzis, then it would not be a good question to say, oh, so you're saying I shouldn't be careful for any other mitzvah? Like, but here, like, is he, unless the caution is like a specific kind of caution. Yeah, Tamar?
I hope this question is clear enough, but like, in what framework is it considered intentional? I think it's a slightly different question than the other questions.
Okay. So
Yeah, I don't know
yeah,
exactly what Ola means, but
yeah,
seems
yeah, okay.
something. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So is there a reason I debated in my own mind whether to classify this as part of the Vegas question? Is there a reason why you would count this as a separate one?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is like a deeper question, I think, her question. I'm asking almost like a factual, like a what is it question.
Okay. Let me write it out and then we'll see if we can if I can understand, because I'm not I do hear that this could be a separate question, but I'm not entirely convinced. So
Okay.
In what framework is this true? Like, what is the sense of ole, right? Like it counts as or it is considered. And the reason why is, like, even if this is a separate part of the question, I feel like both questions have to be answered simultaneously.
Yeah, okay, I hear that.
Yeah, but it's fine if we keep it this way. Yeah. Okay. Vega just morphed. Yeah, Vega, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Sorry, I was just joining on a different device.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this is still related to Ola, but I thought it could also be translated as leads to. In which
Interesting.
case,
Oh, sorry, this is
so
Ola. You're right.
like I mean, if it can be translated to Ola, sorry, as leads to, then is it that the mistake leads to the intentional sin? And what does that mean?
Good question. Let me think about it for a second. I'm just trying to cycle through the uses of that idiom, Ola. Okay, I'll write this as part of this question. Can this mean can Ola mean leads to? And if so, how? Yeah, I don't think it can be, but I don't know for sure, because that's a very it's not an idiom I see very much. So good question though still. And by the way, just FYI, we will take an approach that does say that. So even if the word, you can't read the word that way, there is someone who explains Shigagas Talmud Ola Zadon to mean that it will lead to. Okay, so like even if you can't translate it that way, then I think your intuition is on track. Yeah, Lauren?
What is meant by like Zahir? I guess kind of.
Yes, right. Okay, so this I think is this one I also went through in no, sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say that you can infer this just from the show gig, but not necessarily. So practically speaking, what does careful mean? Like, how do you exercise caution to avoid this shogeg. Yeah. Right. So in other words, you could answer what the shogeg is and not know how to exercise caution. So that's why it's a separate question. Okay, is that it, or are there? Oh no, there's one more question that we definitely have to ask at least. I think I accidentally spoiled this in the shiur description. It's a question we ask on every mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Yeah, tomorrow.
Oh, Lauren, you can go ahead.
I was just gonna say, how does this apply to a chassid? I guess is that.
Yeah, so I'll broaden it a little bit, which is who is the intended audience of this statement, right? So like, if this is just for someone who is a chassid in training, or a let's say like talmid chachamim, or a judge, then why? Like, shouldn't like, I guess, yeah, what why? Meaning like, shouldn't everyone be careful? And then why should that person's shogeg be considered why did that make it big? Be considered mazid. Okay. And then if it's for everyone, then how does that change things? I mean, I don't know if that's changed things. It's not a very good question, but I'm just saying, like, what would be the difference between these two?
Did we do a mishnah similar to this about like a judge being careful and if it's considered mazid if he's not?
Oh,
I feel
that
like
does
it
ring a
sounds,
bell.
yeah, it sounds familiar.
Let's just do a quick skim. Oh, this is in the wrong place. Well, I'm not in the wrong place. Rambam is never the wrong place, but I meant to go to Pirkei Avos. Yeah, I did not realize that when I was preparing it, but now that you say that, then something is ringing a bell. Well, I don't know if this is what you're thinking of, but we did do someone who's haughty in psak. We did don't be a singular judge. Those might have like touched upon it. Maybe it was in 3. Yeah, I don't know. Does sound familiar. There is one that does say this, but we didn't do it, which is in chapter 1, which is it's the first one actually. Heavy masunim bedin, be deliberate in judgment.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking about. But the mazid, I don't know. When you said mazid and judge, I got something in the bell.
Yeah, that could be. It could be that, or it could be encountered the statement like that elsewhere. Okay, I think this is probably good for now. If we have another question, we can add it. Let me just put this into the chat in case you want to look at it. Okay, so there's this, and then the questions. We should be able to get this all in one swipe. No. All right, the last one we have to chop off. And then, okay. Yeah, so this one I feel like there are a lot of mishnahs and Pirkei Avos that I feel like are too daunting, but this one I feel like we could probably work on our own. So what are your answers here? Or you don't have to answer particular questions. You can, but just like, yeah, maybe either give a main idea or if you have particular questions you want to answer, or even intuitions. Yeah, Tamar?
This is maybe just an intuition, but maybe this is the type of thing where you're responsible to not put yourself in a position where you could make a mistake.
Okay, that is a good intuition here. Okay, so perhaps this is warning you to not put yourself into a position where you can make a mistake. Oh, you know what? Hold on. That reminds me of something that we definitely did do, right? Didn't we do a thing that you shouldn't judge? Like you shouldn't be a judge or something? Like that you should avoid judgment. Chosech atzmecha min hadin, I think. Where is it? Yeah. Yeah, hachosek atzmo min adin, porik mimeno eva v'gazal ushvu shav. And we definitely talked about making mistakes there, right? So yeah, you should not put yourself in a position where you're going to be prone to making mistakes. Yeah. Okay, this is going to be very similar to Rabbeinu Yonah's approach, I think. Yeah, Lauren?
It might not be different than tomorrow, but I'm just thinking about like if there's like is there a thing that if like a beis din teaches the wrong halacha, then that mistake is on him as opposed to
Yeah.
like the people?
Yes,
So
right.
I'm wondering, yeah,
The Hedron has to bring a korban when they make a
yeah.
mistake that leads everyone astray, right?
So I'm wondering if maybe this has something to do with that, like the leadership has to be careful when they teach, because if they make a mistake, then you know that's on them basically for
Right.
the whole people.
Yeah. So Sanhedrin is psak, then they are held accountable. So it's one of these things where like yeah, I never know how intertwined these principles are. In other words, is that assuming this, you know, or is this an extension of that? But yeah, I think that my mind went to the same place also. Yeah. Okay, any other intuitions here? This is one where like the intuitions are probably going to land somewhere, meaning that there are so many different takes that the Mefarshim take that your odds are pretty good that your intuition is going to lead somewhere. Okay, so let's do the Mefarshim here. Oh yeah, Fego, go ahead.
It could be that if somebody is studying something, and then they're asked a question, then they're not like when they're studying, they're not super concentrated and focused. Then when somebody asks them a question, they won't want to admit that they haven't been paying attention or that they don't really know the subject well, and then they'll give up psak, which is wrong. And they might like maybe maybe they sense that what they're saying is wrong, but they don't kind of care almost, and then that could lead to intentional averos in another.
Okay, I hear that case. That's probably true in my case. So if a person isn't very careful in their own learning and they're asked for psak, they might be too self-conscious to admit that they don't know, or that their knowledge isn't reliable, and they'll paskin anyway. And that will lead to intentional sin. Yeah, so that is going to be very close to the Meiri. Or Rashi, arguably. Okay, so let's go into the Mefarshim here. So, like I said, I spent the bulk of the time on Rashi. Oh, first of all, I just want to I actually meant to do this earlier. If there is so if Talmud means just all learning, okay, fine. But if Talmud means a specific activity of learning, okay, so then what is Talmud? All right, so the Rambam answers this halachically. Okay, one of the unfortunate shortcomings in, I guess, Jewish day school education that I've seen, and even in yeshiva education, unfortunately, is that people, and not just yeshiva education, I think like I've seen a lot of rabbis make this mistake, that they conflate Torah Sheba'al Peh and Talmud. Okay, that they just use them interchangeably. All right, so we know that this is not the case because halachically, then there's this idea of that the Rambam's going to take a stance on. There's different interpretations of like how you implement this halacha. But the Rambam says in Hilchos Talmud Torah 1:11, V'chayev l'shalish es zman l'midaso. A person should divide or a man is obligated. This is part of the obligation of Talmud Torah, which is only on men. Women get to learn however they want. A man is obligated to divide his learning time into thirds. Shlish b'Torah shebechsav, a third is in Torah shebechsav, the written Torah. Ushlish b'Torah sheba'al peh, and a third is in the oral Torah, which the Rambam defined earlier. I actually should go through this because this is just very important. Rambam's definition of the oral Torah is stated second most clearly in his introduction to the Mishnah Torah. Kol ha-mitzvos shenitnu lo l'Moshe b'Sinai b'ferusha nitnu. All of the commandments that were given to Moshe at Sinai were given with their explanation. Shnemar, as it says, I will give you the stone tablets and the Torah teaching and the mitzvah commandment. Torah zo Torah b'ksav. Torah is the written Torah. Mitzvah ze pirusha, and commandment in this context is its explanation. V'tzivanu la'asos haTorah al pi hamitzvah. We are commanded to do the teaching in accordance with the command, meaning to do the Torah b'ksav in accordance with Torah sheba'al peh. U'mitzvah zo hi hanikras Torah sheba'al peh, and this mitzvah is called Torah sheba'al peh. Okay, Torah sheba'al peh is the instructions for how to implement Torah b'ksav. All right, so I said this is the second clearest expression of it. The clearest, in my opinion, is in the Rambam's Pirush HaMishnayos in the introduction, which I want to read. This is not relevant to our Mishnah, but it is relevant to being Jewish. So I feel like being Jewish is important. Okay, Rambam, I hope this is a good translation. Okay, he says, after the song and the poem, Da, you should know, Ki kol mitzvah shenasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom nitna lo beferusha. Every mitzvah that was given, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Moshe, was given with its explanation. Haya omer lo ha-mitzvah, he would tell him the mitzvah, the achar kach omer lo perusha v'inyana, and afterwards he would tell him its explanation and its concept, or its qualities, however you want to translate inyan, v'chol ma shehu kolel sefer haTorah. Oh, that is a bad translation. That is a horrible translation based on what I know. So give me 1 second. Do I have a copy of this? Oh, good. Oh, wait, no, not good. No, hold on. Sorry, I didn't plan to go over this, but I'm choosing to do this now. Akdama. Yeah, no. Okay, I'm gonna just bust this out of the shelf and read it. Just FYI, Rambam, all of Rambam's works except for the Mishnah Torah and some letters were written in Judeo-Arabic, so there are different translations. And not only that, but he edited the Pirush HaMishnayos constantly. So there's also different editions in terms of like what he wrote. Okay, so Da Shekol, I'll take this off the screen so it's not confusing. Da Shekol mitzvah shenasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe Rabbeinu nitna lo im pirusha. Every mitzvah that God gave to Moshe Rabbeinu, he gave him with its explanation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer Lo HaMikra, God would tell him the pasuk. The achar kach Omer Lo Perusho ubiuro v'chol ma shekolol oso HaMikra HaMechukam. He would and then he would tell him its explanation, its clarification, and everything that was included in the chachma-fied pasuk. Okay, meaning the pasuk with its full chachma. Then he tells how he would teach it. But then here's the part I want to get to is the example. Mashal. I'll give you an example. Amar lo Hashem said to him, Basukos teishu shivas yamim. You should dwell in sukkahs for 7 days. V'gam hodio Hashem yisale. So that was the Torah b'ksav. That was the pasuk. Dwell in sukkahs for 7 days. Open pasuk. Then he told him, "Shesukkah zo chovas hazakarim v'lo nekevos." Then he said, "This obligation in sukkah is for the men, not the women. Ve'ena chova l'cholim v'lo l'holchei drachim, and it's not an obligation for those who are sick or those who are traveling. Ve'im mesachachin osa el b'davar hatomeach min haaretz, and you can only use as schach something that grows from the earth. Ve'im mesachachin osa lo b'temra v'lo b'meshi v'lo b'kelim v'afilu min hatomeach ba'aretz kagon hamachzlos ba'bugadim, and you cannot use as schach wool or silk or vessels." Or anything, even something that grows from the ground, like mats or garments. And eating and drinking and sleeping in it should be for all 7 days. And its space should be no less than 7 handbreadths long by 7 handbreadths wide. And its height should not be less than 10 handbreadths. Then when the shliach came, he received, meaning Moshe came, he received this mitzvah and its explanation. Same thing for all the other mitzvahs. The psukim were written in scrolls, and the explanation was given by word of mouth. Okay, so that's Torah Shebichsav is the pasuk. Torah Peh is the halachic explanation of how to keep the mitzvah. And then the third, any questions on that before we do Talmud? Because that was a big definition.
Would you mind repeating it, please?
Yeah, sure. Let me actually write it down. Okay, so written Torah is the is what he calls the teaching, which is the psukim. Okay, oral Torah is the mitzvah, which is the explanation of how to carry out the teaching in the psukim. Okay, and the example is I'm not going to write out all those things, but dwell in sukkos, in booths, in huts for 7 days. Okay, so that's the written Torah. The written Torah says dwell in huts for 7 days, and the oral Torah answers the questions: who, what are huts? How are they made? What does dwell mean? What does days imply? Who is exempt? Etc. Right? So, in other words, you could keep the teaching without Torah Sheba'al Peh, but there's no way of knowing if that's what God really commanded. And that's really what the Karaites did, is they attempted to keep what is written in the Torah based on their own interpretations. But this is God's authorized explanation of the Torah Shebiksav. Does that clarify things? Take the silence as a yes. Okay. So then the third one is, the third part of your learning is V'shlish Yavin V'yaskil Achris Davar Merishiso, is understand and comprehend the end of a principle from its beginning. V'yotzi Davar Midavar, and derive one principle from another. V'yadama Davar L'davar, and compare one principle to another. V'yadin B'miros She'atorah Nidreshes Behen, and apply the methods by which the Torah is expounded. That's the 13 hermeneutical principles. Ad sheyida heachu ikra midos, until you know the essence of these methods. And how the prohibited and permitted and other things like that, meaning tamei, tahor, pater, chayev, come from the principles that were learned in Torah Sheba'al Peh. Inyan zeh hu nikra Talmud. This activity, endeavor, is called Talmud. Okay, so Talmud, he said a lot of things. Let's just call it the full analysis of the oral Torah. Okay, which is, concepts, derivations, how the practical law emerges from the principles. Okay, yeah, right. So what was I going to say? So Talmud, so Torah Shebiksav is a set entity. Okay, it's the psukim that God gave to Moshe. All right. Torah Sheba'al Peh is also a finite set of explanations that God gave to Moshe about how to keep the mitzvos. Okay, and you can argue that maybe that grows with the addition of rabbinic laws, or when there's machlokas. Okay, that gets into some weeds that I don't want to get into. But Talmud is not a fixed body of teachings. Talmud is a way of thinking about the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Okay, I heard Rabbi Cheit say in the name of Rav Soloveitchik that one time Rav Soloveitchik was holding a math book, and he said, this book is not mathematics. Mathematics is the type of thinking that produced this book. Similarly, if you hold up a volume of Gemara, this is not Talmud. This is the Talmud is the type of teaching that produced Talmud Bavli. Okay, so it's a certain type of analysis. All right. So if we mean Talmud according to the Rambam, then that's what Talmud is. Okay, it's an activity of conceptual analysis of oral Torah. Now, is this going to be relevant to what we do? We may not know. Okay, but I wanted to define it. So, any questions about that?
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's an important definition. People don't focus on it as much.
So does this mean that oral Torah is basically just like halacha, and Talmud is like the
Oh,
13
funny you should
principles
say
of
that.
deriving it.
Funny you should say that, because that is what got the Rambam into trouble. Okay, because the Rambam said, and this is another thing people misunderstand. When I'm just going to actually read this from my translation. Had it. In the mission statement of the Mishnah Torah, he says at the end, for this reason, Moshe, son of Maimon, the Sephardi, found that the current situation is unbearable. And so, relying on the help of the rock, blessed be he, I intently studied all these books, meaning all the books of Torah Sheba'al Peh and the Gaonim, for I saw fit to write what can be determined from all these works in regard to what is forbidden and permitted, unclean and clean, and the other rules for Torah, everything in clear language and terse style, so that the whole oral Torah would become thoroughly known to all, without bringing problems and solutions or differences of view, but rather clear, convincing, and correct statements, in accordance with the legal rules drawn from all these works and commentaries that have appeared from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu to the present. Sorry, of Rabbeinu Kadosh to the present. This is so that all the laws should be accessible to the small and the great, in the laws of each and every commandment and the laws of the legislations of the Torah scholars and prophets. In short, so that a person should need no other work in the world in any of the laws of Israel, but that this work might collect the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh, including the positive legislations, the customs, and the negative legislations enacted from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu until the writing of the Talmud, as the Gaonim interpreted it for us in all of the works of commentary they wrote after the Talmud. Thus, I've called this work Mishneh Torah, the restatement of the oral Torah. For a person reads the Torah Sheba'al first, then reads this work and knows from it the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh without needing to read any other book in between them. So people jumped on the Rambam for many reasons. But one of the reasons is ignorance, which is that they said, oh, you're trying to replace the Talmud? And if anyone just learns what the Rambam, how he defines Torah Sheba'al Peh, he'd say, no, Talmud is an activity that you can't replace. You can't even write it down. It's a way of thinking about this stuff. And the Talmud Bavli is a repository for that. I'm not claiming that you can read the Mishnah Torah and get all of Talmud Bavli. I'm claiming that you can read the Mishnah Torah and get all of Torah Sheba'al Peh. So as Feiga asked, Torah Sheba'al Peh is the laws of how to carry out the 613 mitzvahs in action. That's what Torah Sheba'al Peh is. So it is, in a way, I won't want to say it's synonymous with halacha, because not all halacha is Torah Sheba'al Peh, but certainly the halachos for how to keep the Taryag mitzvos that are in the Torah Sheba'al, that is Torah Sheba'al Peh. Okay, so let's move on, even though this is a fascinating topic that could take take us a lot of time. So now let's do Rashi, okay? Short Rashi. Okay, and this is the only one I didn't translate ahead of time because I wanted to type it out. Sheshigagas Talmud Ola Zadon, for an error in Talmud counts as intentional. Shemitoch, that because She'in Medaktekim b'Talmud, because they aren't now, okay, how do you translate medaktek? That's one of those words that like has a certain feel to it that feels like not entirely untranslatable, but there's some good English ones.
To be precise?
Yeah, because they aren't precise. Any other translations?
Particular?
Yeah, particular, meticulous, exacting, detail-oriented. Okay, so it doesn't quite capture medak, because dak means thin. So mid-dak-dek is like you're, going on fine detail. Okay, so because they aren't medakdek, the Talmud, in Talmud, I'm going to leave that untranslated. Umorin hora'a shelo kedin, and they give halachic instruction, which is not in accordance with the true law. Naaseh kamo zadon, it becomes as though it is intentional. Sheshigagas talmidei chachamim naasin lehem kazdonos, because the unintentional errors of talmidei chachamim are considered for them like intentional sins. Okay, so you know what? Instead of doing analysis of Rashi, is it better if we just, usually we have like a billion questions, but I feel like here we could just copy and paste the questions and then write the answers in as we go. I think that I'm intuitively, I'm thinking that that's a clear system for this one. Start a new list. Wait. I'm not seeing the menu that, I thought there's a thing that just allows you to, All right, we'll just do this. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what questions of our questions here? Actually, let me copy and paste the Rashi into the chat. Okay, what questions is Rashi answering? Yeah, Tamar?
He seems to explain that Talmud is at least something that results in halakhic instruction.
Yeah, okay. So he's saying here that that the type of Talmud we're talking about is specifically that which specifically which can result in psak. I'm just gonna use psak for halakhic construction because it's too long to type out, and psak is what we call it. Okay, so yeah, hora is the formal term. Okay. All right. What else?
I guess based on that, maybe number two, it's kind of like it applies, I guess, because it's like if you derive all stock from Talmud, so I guess it applies to really everything.
Interesting. So would you say though that the Mishnah is telling you to be careful in tzitzis, or are you just saying that being careful in Talmud could lead to failure to be careful in Talmud could lead to mistakes in all mitzvos?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I thought it was the way I was reading it is that he was saying like kind of like going based on what you just learned in the Rambam that if you're not careful in your Talmud, then you're going to end up giving the wrong type of stock, the wrong type of teaching. So that could apply. I mean, I guess yeah, since this is pretty straightforward what the halacha is, but
No, I mean like we would have brachos in any area of halacha.
yeah, I guess so. I guess like then you will end up being you'll teach the wrong thing. You'll come to the wrong conclusion. You'll because you'll be doing the wrong analysis.
Okay, right. But in other words, at the end of the day, though, maybe I misunderstood the original question, but like, is he saying be careful in paskening and be careful in brachos and be careful in tzitzis and be careful in ma'akeh? Or is he saying be careful in paskening because it could lead to bad stuff in all these other areas?
The last thing.
Yeah, okay,
the last
right,
thing.
okay.
Yeah.
Right. So like, obviously, caution is warranted in all halacha, but this specific word of caution is I guess this word of this specific word of caution is specific to psak or to Talmud that leads to hora. Yeah. Tamar?
Can I jump forward into answer questions?
Yeah.
Okay. I think being careful, I think is pretty clear that I don't know exactly what it means, but it's about the Talmud to avoid the error. You have to be medactic.
Yeah. Sorry, you're talking about question number, where are we?
I'm sorry, 6.
Six,
Six
okay.
means they should be medactic in their Talmud.
Yeah, right. Is that that it means you should be medactic in your Talmud. Okay. Which he doesn't explain what that means, but like we know it has to do with details. Okay. Yeah. And I feel like now you at least have an operational principle. Am I being medactic? Like at least that's something you can ask yourself. Yeah. Fega?
I'd say that the intended audience seems to be people who will be giving psak.
Yeah. So that's a biggie, right? Is the intended audience is people who will be giving psak. Okay, namely Talmidei Chachamim who are does he say if they were asked? No, he just did more in hara. Yeah. Who are on the level to paskin. Yeah. I think we could also answer question number 3. What does shogeg mean? Which is shogeg is failure to be medactic, right? Is i.e. Forgetting, misremembering, misapplying a detail. Okay. Which as opposed to what? Like what other mistake? Like when Rashi is saying you're not being medactic, what mistake is he ruling out? And I don't want to say ruling out in the sense that like this would not be within the purview, but like the fact that Rashi says medactic means he is focusing on a specific kind of mistake and not focusing on other kinds of mistakes. So just to give us a smattering of like other options here, what other types of shogeg could we be talking about here?
I mean, maybe if you followed all the steps, you followed all the rules, but maybe you were missing an important detail that could have affected the psak, or you don't have all the information, some sort of thing that's out of your control.
Okay, right. Okay, yeah. For example, something outside of your control. Okay, what else?
I was thinking maybe also not like a huge mistake. I'm not sure if he's ruling that out or not.
Yeah, I don't think he's ruling out okay, you mean like a blatant error?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I don't
So
know. I mean, I guess it could still come from not being medactic, but
right, I would say that they're like kal v'chomer, like if you're saying you should be careful on the details, then you certainly should be careful on the big things. It's just that you don't need to tell someone that, in this area. I'd say the clearest example is or a mistake in theorizing. Okay, because theorizing is not that you aren't being like those like this. You could be a genius and still not be medactic, or a mistake in, devotion, how much time you devote to thinking, like there are a lot of other mistakes that are not failures in dikduk. Okay, that's what I wanted to just clarify here. Okay. All right, so we've got that.
Wait, can I ask about that? Because
Yeah,
I
sure.
would think if you're not giving enough time, that might be a shogeg kind of not.
Sorry, say that one more time. You think
like what? I would think theorizing. I get how that could be not held responsible for, but I guess that how much time you devote, I guess then you're not really being careful if you're not,
right. But that's the thing though, is that I'm not saying that these aren't mistakes. I'm saying that Rashi is not learning the Mishnah this way, right? The fact that Rashi says you're not medactic means that he's focusing on dikduk. Okay. As opposed to, for example, I'll just a sneak peek Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah says, "Sheyachzor hadvarim ad ki lo yuchal lishkoach davar." You need to review matters until you're incapable of forgetting them. V'ad yir la'omkan shel dvarim, and until you go to the depths of the subject. Ki teva ha'enosh katzer lahavin ha'chachma v'shichacha metzuya b'bnei adam, because human nature, man by nature, has difficulty grasping chachma, and forgetfulness is common. Gam lo yismach basvara harishona. You shouldn't rely on the first svara that you have. So, like Rashi could have said all these things, right? He should have said, "Be careful with memory. Be careful to go into depth. Don't be hasty in svara." But Rashi just said, "No, medactic." That's what leading me to believe that Rashi means like a specific kind of mistake.
Okay.
Yeah, Tamar.
I think I don't really. Maybe we have to just explain the word medactic, but I don't know enough about what it means to rule out some of the things that you said. Can you explain a little bit more your understanding of that phrase?
Yeah, medactic, and I don't know for sure either, but like medactic means that you are careful, okay, about details. You're detail oriented, right? So if you give me a svara, for example, let's say we're learning Gemara in a halachic area, and you give me a svara, okay, and let's say it is a elementary level svara, and really in order to paskin, you need like a sophisticated svara. I would not criticize you by saying you're not being careful enough, or you're not being detail oriented enough, Or let's say if you become really attached to your idea, okay, and you don't want to listen to other people's opinions, okay, I'd say that is a failing that could lead to mistaken psak, but I wouldn't say your failing is that you're not being detail oriented. I'd say your failing is that you're being haughty, or you're being closed-minded, or you're being stubborn,
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. And I think Rabbeinu Yonah, unlike Rashi just says medactic, Rabbeinu Yonah gives a bunch of examples. So I feel like Rabbeinu Yonah probably means a lot of different things, not just davka these three, but Rashi means medactic. Okay, so now comes the big question. Okay, and this is what I spent the most time on. Okay, how can a shogeg be considered mazid? Okay, in what framework? Also, yeah, both of these questions. Okay, in what framework is this true? What does it mean it counts as? I'm going to combine these into one question, just because that's how my mind is seeing it, and I'm actually just going to move this down here, just so I can have more room to type. Yeah. So this is the big question that that Rashi does not like spell out. Yeah, Fega.
I mean, could it be that obviously if somebody is not paying attention when they're learning, they're not going to be able to speak coherently and accurately about the topic. So it's like a natural consequence of their inattention.
Right, but wouldn't you just still call that a mistake? Meaning, isn't that a unintentional error?
I mean, maybe the first time, but not the second time, because if when somebody asks them a question and they realize that they're not being, you know, fully like they're not being medoctic, then they would know the next time they're learning that there are potential problems that will come, but they're not investing in that. Like they're still
Okay.
not investing, so it becomes
so
intentional.
here's the difficulty here. Okay, and you could totally accuse me of reading too much into this. Okay, but like I would call that like another like this. Let's say I make a mistake in a detail. Okay. And I just wasn't being careful. Okay. And then I find out that there was a mistake because I wasn't being careful. So the first time was shogeg. Okay. Because it was unintentional. That's what shogeg means. It was unintentional. But now let's say I'm going and I know that I should be more attentive to detail and I'm not. So I would call that mazid. Because now I'm consciously saying I don't care about details, So like what I'm looking for is something that like how can a shogeg be considered mazid? It seems like either it is fully shogeg or it's fully mazid, And you could argue with me. And by the way, I think Rabbeinu Yonah does argue with me, but
To me, it sounds like he says at the end that Talmidei Chachamim have like a different kind of category because it
yeah,
says
right.
here shogeg is considered zedon for them.
Right. It does sound like that. Yeah. Let's just give an example, by the way, of shogeg here. Okay, let's just do example of shogeg. Okay, which is that what are the classic examples, right? Like on Shabbos, like I do a malacha because sorry. Let's say like I take the peas out of my carrots. For some reason, that's the example that's in my mind because when I first learned Hilchos Shabbos, that was what the example that was used. Okay, I take the peas out of my carrots, which is borer. Okay, but I don't know that borer is usser. Okay, that'd be one example of shogeg. Okay, or I take the peas out of my carrots, and I know that borer is usser, okay, but I don't know that this is borer, okay. And then another case is, or I know that that taking peas out of carrots is borer, which is usser, but I forget that it's Shabbos. Okay, so those are examples of shogeg. Okay, example of mazid. I fully know, and don't forget that eating cheeseburgers is usser, but I really, really want it, and I eat it anyway. Okay, that's mazid. So I don't know if these are the best examples, but these are examples that always come to my mind. So what's the main difference between like, I mean, this is going to sound so redundant that it's almost a tautology, right? But like, what makes something mazid instead as opposed to shogeg?
Intent?
Yeah, right. Again, it almost sounds obvious, right? Intentionality, right? Is that if you have a forbidden act combined, I guess that stems from, or that's done with intention, intentionality and knowledge that it's usser, right? Because the guy, if I'm separating peas from carrots, I'm doing it intentionally. Yeah, actually, I don't want to say intentionally. Let's just make it so. I don't want to say forbidden intentionality. I'm just trying to isolate the component.
I guess it's like it's forbidden and you do it anyway.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm trying to say here. Is that
Yeah.
that if you know it's forbidden and you intentionally do it, okay, then that's mazid. Yeah. Okay. So that's I'm just the reason why I'm asking this is just to strengthen the question. So how can shogeg ever be mazid? If it's shogeg, you don't have the intention, Let me show you what Rabbeinu Yonah says. Okay, we've already slipping into Rabbeinu Yonah here. Okay, Rabbeinu Yonah does take the approach that I think Fega is inclined to take, which is so we read this part that you shouldn't rely on your first svara, kamosha kasavnu b'tchilas sefer. That's what he writes on the first mishnah. Asher b'choze ose zadon. Okay, all of this in all of this he is considered as though he's acting with intentionally. Because in any area of Torah where error is common, is commonplace, is frequent, and he doesn't pay attention and he sins, that's not shogeg. He's called negligent. Okay. He should have thought about the fact that every person errs, and he should have been careful. I don't know if this is a typo. Should have been careful to not sin, but he incurred sin. And he was not careful. There's 4 categories. Poshea, which is willful negligence, meaning you know that you're being negligent. Okay, I think that's like the case Fega was trying to construct there about you know that you should be more careful and you're not. Okay. Karuv lemezid, close to intentional. Shogeg, inadvertent, and karuv laones, and close to accidental. So Rabbeinu Yonah is really diving into the intentionality. I think the general thing here, and I don't mean to cheapen Rabbeinu Yonah, but I do think Rabbeinu Yonah is the basic pshat of this mishnah, which is any type of mistake that people are prone to, if you know people are prone to a certain kind of mistake, and you engage in that activity and don't take proper caution, then it's as if you were committing an intentional sin, right? And this Rabbeinu Yonah extends this to these are terms that apply in all areas of halacha and in all areas of damages. So, for example, if you juggle torches over a playpen with kids in it, that's a dangerous activity, and people drop torches. So if you drop a torch and it burns a baby, so then you can't say that you were that it was unintentional, because you put yourself. This is what Tamar was saying. Who said yeah, it's like what Tamar was saying. Putting yourself in a position where you are liable to make a mistake. You're likely to make a mistake. So I feel like that's Rabbeinu Yonah. That's the common interpretation, and that's basically saying for you, it is it's like a zadon. Now, what's the main difference between Rabbeinu Yonah and Rashi in terms of the case we're talking about here? Not the types of error, but what's the one thing that Rashi puts the emphasis on that Rabbeinu Yonah does not mention at all?
I guess being a Talmud Chacham.
That is true. Rabbeinu Yonah does imply that this is for all people. That's true. But that is in terms of the audience. I'm saying in terms of the application here, or the I don't know how to say it without giving it away. Well, let me ask this question. How does Rabbeinu Yonah understand Talmud, and how does Rashi understand Talmud? Yeah, tomorrow?
I mean, it seems like Rabbeinu Yonah is taking Talmud pretty generally.
Whereas Rashi is saying what?
And Rashi is saying it's the theory that leads to psak.
Psak, exactly, right? Okay, so this applies to all people, not just Talmidei Chachamim, and all Torah, okay, not just psak. So now going back to Rashi, okay, I think that's a big hint here, okay, which is that, hold on, this is going to bother me forever. I got to be medactic on the, oh, there we go. Okay. So the hint is that Rashi's interpretation is only for Talmidei Chachamim and only for psak. Okay. So what does he mean here? So how can shogeg equal mazid in any case? Either the intent is there or it's not. Now look, what I said I could be reading a lot of Rashi. You could just say, well, Rashi means what Rabbeinu Yonah means, but he just somehow says it's only for psak. Like, in other words, if you go into psak and you're not medactic and you make a mistake, then that's really on you. You could say that. Yeah, Tamar?
Maybe, I'm not sure if this is a stretch. Maybe you can say that the person does know that they weren't medactic, and then giving the psak in that way is a mazid offense.
Okay. Oh, that's actually, hold on a second. Giving the psak is a mazid offense. Okay. So let me write down what you said, and then I think I'm gonna jump off of that to a different theory. Okay. So tomorrow's theory is that sorry, say it one more time. You said it really well.
I was saying that maybe the person who's not medactic, a Talmid Chacham, is aware that he wasn't medactic, and then if he chooses to give the psak in that state, then that is a mazid action.
In that state, then that is a mazid action. Okay. So my only critique of this is what if he isn't aware? And it seems like Rashi would include someone who is not aware that they're not being medactic. Meaning you are right that would be a mazid action to Paskin, even though but I think that this could easily be someone. And look, I'm sure you had your own experiences in any area. Forget halacha for 1 second, but like there are certain areas where like you misjudge the standard of diktuk that's necessary. Like you think, let's say for example, this is a mistake that I'm sure happens to a lot of people, that the difference between cooking and baking, right? Is that if you're really good at cooking, you know that you can like eyeball stuff and like do it to taste. Whereas in baking, it has to be exact. And I'm sure there are cases, I had one just last week where like the measurement was off and it ruined the entire thing, So you're just not aware that like, oh, this requires a different level of diktuk, It's not like I know they have me medactic, I'm not. It's just I got the wrong standard. Or here's another example that I always rant about is people who don't realize that there are better and worse editions of printed Sfarim, who think that you could just open up a random Mishnah Torah and think that that's accurate when there are really critical editions of the Mishnah Torah and not. It's not like they are knowingly relying on an inexact version. They just never realized that this was an area where diktuk could apply. Okay, so let me suggest my theory here. Okay, and again, if you say I don't buy it, you're reading too much into Rashi, then I'll nod and say yeah, maybe. Okay, but I either way, I think this is a cool idea. Okay, let me just wind up for 1 second. Let me just think here. Okay, I'm gonna try typing this out. Okay, because I think it'll be easier here. So this is my answer, which is mazid, an avera b'mazid, requires two components. Okay, A, forbidden act, and B, intentionality. Okay. So the thing is like this, is when you rely on a psak from a Talmid Chachamim, okay, they are supplying the intentionality, and you are doing the forbidden act. Okay, so what's happening is in reality, it could be that neither party is aware that a mistake is being made, or that an avera is being done, and in that sense, both of them are shogeg. Okay, but if you are a Talmid Chacham and you are not properly medakdek, and you sanction someone else's action, okay, I mean, certainly your own action also, but someone else's action, you are producing a mazid avarian, okay, so you spell avarian, an intentional sinner actor in the world. Okay, and what I want to say here is like this, is that ordinarily we think of, oh, I forgot a step here. Hold on a second here. Let me just ask this. What makes mazid worse than shogeg? So usually we say something like something that has to do with your perfection, right? Like, knowingly doing wrong seems more corrupt than unknowingly doing it. Okay, so in this case, we don't consider your shogeg to be mazid in the framework of personal perfection, but rather in terms of the system. Okay, your inexactitude is producing mazid actors in the world, okay, and causing those violations to happen. I have a weird example. Okay, if you've ever seen little kids at anti-Israel protests holding signs, okay, so what's going on there? So on the one hand, I'm not going to write this, I'll just talk it out. Okay, on the one hand, they clearly don't know what they're doing. Okay, but no one would say that they are as bad as an adult who knowingly protests Israel for some like anti-Semitic thing, right? But what's happening is their parent is basically, they're doing the action of holding the sign that says the anti-Semitic thing, and their parent is supplying the intentionality. This kid would not be out there protesting if it weren't for the parent telling them to do that, So it's the kid, they're doing the action, and the intentionality was supplied by someone else. Same thing here is that when a non-Talmid Chacham relies on a Talmid Chacham for psak, they're doing a forbidden action, but because they wouldn't have done it if not for the Talmid Chacham, the Talmid Chacham is sanctioning their intentionality, is producing their intentionality. They are doing it intentionally. They're intentionally doing an avera, but the intentionality is not coming from them knowing that this is us or choosing to do it anyway. It's coming from someone else telling them, yeah, do this. This is a good thing, Am I making any sense?
So is it for the person doing it, it's mazid, but it's because of the shogeg of the Talmid Chacham who gave him the psak, and therefore overall it's considered mazid?
Yeah, so it is going to be so I still think I agree with what you were saying earlier, Lauren, that the culpability, like Hashem is not going to hold the person responsible for listening to his rabbi, because that's what you're responsible with. He has no choice. He has to rely on a judge, but it's the judge's fault. But what I'm saying here is that In fact, I'm trying to answer another question by this. This is another thing I'm also trying to do here is that, hold on.
Right, I hear what you're saying. I think, but I guess I just said like maybe it's called mazed because the fact that there's intentionality behind it, even though it's
Yeah, right.
unintentional.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, this is in Pirkei Avos because not every individual. So I mean, okay, for two reasons. Okay, one is that not everyone can poskin. Okay, and if you like, let's say if you are totally not on the level of poskin, and you try doing it anyway, and you make a mistake, I'd say that what you're doing is bad, but I wouldn't say that you're making this mistake. Okay, it's like if someone who is a surgeon is doing surgery and doesn't read the charts carefully and then makes a mistake and ends up harming someone, that person is making this mistake in surgery. But if a total layperson goes into a surgery room and starts doing surgery and causes a bunch of harm, I say that they're doing something really bad, but they're not. It's not like, oh, sir, you're not being medoctic. No, you're trying to do surgery and you don't know how to do it. That's malpractice. That's like really bad in some other way. But in order to be able to be in the parsha of making this mistake, you have to know how to poskin and then fail to be medoctic properly. So that's one reason why this is only for Talmid Chachamim. But secondly, is that everyone should care about their own averos and their own level of mezid and shogeg. But it takes a high-level person or leader to be responsible for the I guess the wrongdoing of producing more mazid actors in the system, of introducing more mazid actors into the system. That makes any sense. Okay, you don't have to buy it. Yeah, tomorrow.
I think I don't really understand. Do we say? I think I don't understand where the intentionality is coming from.
Because what's
no,
happening
the knowledge. Sorry, the knowledge that it's usher. No one here knows that it's usher.
Right. Okay, let me think about it for 1 second here. Yeah, I hear. So there's one of two possibilities. Either the idea is wrong, or the definition of mazid does not require knowledge that is usher. Could you define mazid as intentionally doing a forbidden act? Now, I know that seems to go against my example with the shogeg thing, where the guy is doing borer intentionally, but he just doesn't know it's borer. But maybe that's just in Hilchos Shabbos, because you need melechas machsheves, because you need like however you want to find melechas machsheves. Like the part of the definition of the malacha that's usher is this level of like professional craftsmanship, like you're doing a craftsman act. But maybe you can say mazid is in another area is intentionally doing a forbidden act. And so the non-chacham or the non-posek who goes to a chacham for psak is basically saying, I don't know whether this act is usher or not. And the Talmud Chacham unknowingly tells him to do something that is usher. So now this guy has an act that's usher and intentionality, but the intentionality traces back to the chacham. So it's not chalked up as mazid for the guy who's relying on him. It's chalked up as mazid for the Talmud Chacham because he's the one who assembled that mazid guy. That's how I would answer it, but I don't know if that's a good definition of mazid. So I am modifying it.
Okay, I have to think about it, I think.
Okay, I also have to think about it. Yeah. Okay. I want to do Rabbeinu Yonah, I feel like we did. I just want to show you two more interpretations and then we'll call it a night here because I want to end by 9:30 at least. So the Meiri, okay, says so I'm going to read this and you tell me what the Meiri is saying differently, okay? And again, I'm going to go with my Hebrew here. He's hiru shetei mishnaso sedura befiv. He warns that one's learning should be fluent in his mouth, literally arranged in his mouth. Achiyu divrei Torah mitsuyim biyado, to the point where the words of Torah are available to his hand. Mizumayim lahora, ready for psak. Okay, im lo kain, because if this weren't the case, sometimes someone will ask you for something that's necessary or urgent, and you'll paskin in a way that's not proper. And consequently you'll cause him to stumble. You cannot claim like there was a mistake. Anyone whose mind and heart are on psak, he should toil in it until it is arranged in his mouth, till it's fluent in his mouth. Chazal say as by way of like a practical lesson, anyone who forgets something in his Talmud violates a lo saseh. Shnemar says, beware for yourself lest you forget these principles. The sof hakavana, the ultimate intent of this mission is, if you don't find yourself ready for this, you should not be quick to express the matter verbally until you investigate and check it very, very well. Same thing in your learning. Lo yazuz Allah biur mishanaso kehogen lo tviehu atzluso lishigas horaa. You should, in your learning, you should not budge from there until the mishnah is properly clarified, so that your laziness does not bring you to a shgaga in hora. Okay, so what is I guess I'm not going to do a full analysis of Meiri, but the Meiri's emphasis here. Well, what's he saying? What's he emphasizing? So I'll start you off. Like Rashi, he focuses on psak. Okay, he mentions hora a couple times. But unlike Rashi, who emphasizes the quality of being midakdek, the Meiri emphasizes
just remembering and having it well versed, your Torah well versed.
I would say readiness, which is a combination of memory, fluency, and does he say I mean obviously accuracy, but does he say accuracy? And look at the Hebrew. Yeah, sidur b'fiv, and availability. Yeah, and accuracy. Yeah. So see, this is what I meant when I said that this like the Mefarshim here are very similar, but the fact that they emphasize different things leads me to believe that there is a difference. Like Rashi does not say that it's fluent. You know, how do we know that Rashi knows that idea? Because, and this is just like a famous Rashi in it's not in the Shema. I don't even know what I'm going to say. V'shinatam levanecha, I think he says. V'shinatam. So plain pshat is you should teach it, but Rashi says lashon chidud, that it's language of sharpening. You should sharpen it in the mouth. Shihei mechudadim b'ficha. It should be sharp in your mouth. Im yishalcha adam davar lo teitzarich legamgam. If someone asks you for something, you shouldn't be what do you call it? Like not mumble. How does the English here say it? Stammer, right? You shouldn't stammer. You should say it immediately, right? So Rashi clearly knows this idea. He's not using the word sadr, but he's saying should be sharp and ready to answer, But Rashi earlier just says medakdek, being careful. So what's the idea of the Meiri? Anyone have any options? Again, I didn't have time to prepare this. I mean, one thing that does emerge, okay, which is that like practical guideline, okay, is according to Rashi. So let me just wait. Let's just do this, okay? Summary. Let's do grand summary. Oops, sorry. Grand summary of practical bottom line. What do you need to ask yourself to make sure you're being cautious? Okay, so Rashi says, am I being medakdek? Okay, Rabbeinu Yonah says, is this an area where error is frequent? And if so, am I guarding against that kind of error? Okay, so that's a very, very catch-all type thing. Okay. The Meiri is saying, so what is the Meiri saying? What question would he say that you should ask yourself? Yeah, Vega?
Maybe have I reviewed this recently and like in depth?
Yeah, but for the purpose though of measuring, am I ready? Okay. And then what you're saying is, or do I need review or more depth? Okay, right. But yeah, so am I ready? So it is interesting how asking yourself these questions like elicits different responses. Like, let's say, for example, it's an area where you are medakdek, okay, but you have not gone into depth enough, So then asking Rashi's question might not help you, but Meiri's question, would help you, right? Or let's say with Rabbeinu Yonah, let's say this is an area where people are, or sorry, let's reverse it. Let's say like, how would I say it? With Rabbeinu Yonah, you might know that this is an area where people make mistakes, but you might not realize that you're not ready to be in that area. Like let's say, for example, like anyone who does like high elevation tightrope walking knows that people fall, right? But if he overestimates himself, so like he would check off from any other thing, like, is this an area where people make mistakes? Yes. Am I guarding against the error? Yes. Am I on the level to walk on the tightrope? Am I ready? No, I haven't trained enough. So like these are different questions that don't necessarily like, it's not like you check one and you automatically check the other ones. All right, let's do one more, not Sforno. Let's do Rashbatz. This is a weird one. Okay, so he says like this. I'm actually just going to read this in English because I want to end on time. He would say that a scholar must be careful in his learning, studying matters with precision. Okay, so he also says dikduk. And if he hears something from his teacher, he must take care to ask for the reasoning behind it. For if he is not exact in his learning and doesn't know the reason for what he has learned, he may err in his actions and ruling. And such error is counted as intentional. For a negligent person who is like one who sins willfully, just as an accidental sinner is like one coerced. Okay, so it's interesting. He says Rashi's thing of dikduk, but he also says ask for the reasons. And this is a very common mistake that people make in every area of Chachma, is that they think you could just apply the conclusions. But if you don't understand the reasoning, you might not realize that, like, this conclusion doesn't apply in this case. Okay, in the chapter Lo Yachbor, this is where it gets a little weird. In Bava Basra, it says that Yoav killed his teacher because the teacher had taught him the verse Timche es Zecher Amalek, with the letter Zayin pronounced with a Shva and the Kaf with a Ptah. So Timche es Zechar Amalek, okay, which would mean you should kill all of the male Amalekites. This mistake resulted in a deliberate transgression. As it says, Yoav and all Israel remained there 6 months until they exterminated every Zachar in Edom. So he actually acted on this fully. He killed his teacher because of the verse Cursed is one who performs the work of Hashem deceitfully, and he had acted deceitfully by not paying attention to whether his students were reading correctly. That verse is immediately followed by, and cursed is the one who withholds his sword from blood. And on this, the sages warn us to appoint a teacher who is precise in reading, hamadaktik bekriya. Such a teacher is preferable even to one who is greater in wisdom but imprecise, because once an error enters, it stays. In the chapter of Arei Psachim, they said, when you teach your son Torah, teach him from a corrected text. Okay, and this is another thing also, is that, again, a lot of people don't know this, but Art Scroll, even though it's a good publishing company, does not use the most reliable text of Tanakh. Whereas Koren uses a more reliable one. And so there will be differences in the editions of Tanakh where it might change the meaning. Okay, like the words might actually be different, or the vocalization is different, which might change the meaning. I actually encountered this where I was quoting something. Where did I get this from? There is a pasuk in, see, here we go. Az ehefoch. Pasuk in Zechariah, I think, or Tzfanya, I always forget. Tzfanya 3:18, 3:16. I don't know. I'm making this up. 3:9. Az ehepoch el amim safa brura likro kulam b'shem Hashem. Sorry, likro kulam. Az epoch el amim safa brura likro kulam b'shem Hashem la'avdo shchem echad. Then I will transform or change over the people to having a clear clear speech, to all call in the name of Hashem and to serve him as one. So I believe, is there a mincha shy on this? No. So I think this is a case where there is a version of the Tanakh that I think Rashi had where it says Yahafoch. Now, does that make a difference? I don't know. Efoch means I will transform as opposed to he will transform. So I don't know if that makes a difference, but there's like these types of things people aren't necessarily aware of. All right. Anyway, so that's what he means by a corrected text, meaning that I think there's a thing that people think that like all, Tanakhs are equal, but they're not all equal. And back then, especially because they were relying on scribes. Okay. And then
I didn't know that about Tanakh.
Yeah, right. And it's not like there are sometimes there are super radical ones. I've been meaning to like write about this for a long time. But there are differences where Rashi, the Chumashim that Rashi was relying on had different words. It's like there's different words in the Tanakh. But anyway, that's something for a later time. So in Yalkut Shimoni, they said our rabbis taught a mistake in learning is considered intentional. Therefore, the Torah writes nefesh kisechata, a soul that sins, because it refers to a lofty soul and not adam kiyachata. This explanation is given that even though it was unintentional, he still requires atonement since he has a higher soul derived from the angels who do not sin. Shuhu min hamalachim she'enam chotim. As I explained in the third part of this work, contrary to the opinion of the philosophers. Don't know what he's referring to there. If the error came through his own negligence, then he's punishable. Based on this, if someone made a mistake because he wasn't careful in his learning, it is considered as intentional. And the sages already said in Bava Metzia, chapter 8 of Ve'elu Metzios, that the mistakes of Torah scholars are considered deliberate transgressions. And this is what the Mishnah says. Rabbi Yehuda says, be careful in learning, for a mistake in learning is considered as intentional. Now, I'm only reading this to you for one purpose, which is to say, what is he talking about? Okay, like Rabbeinu Yonah was at least clear where he said, he basically said, B'chol davar midavar Torah u'mitzvah she'ataos mitzuya. Okay, any area where error is common, and then he gave 3 examples of that. Okay, Rashbatz is just all over the place. Rashbatz is saying that you should be medakdek in kriya, and you should ask for the reasons behind what your teacher says. And he gives this example of misreading literal diktuk of like grammar, okay, and thinking it's the wrong vocalization, or not grammar, or like relying on the wrong Masorah. And then he says you should have a corrected text, and that's even more important than greater wisdom. And then any mistake is considered intentional in learning, and then the soul is culpable because it is similar to the angels. And if this is through your own negligence and not being careful in learning, it's intentional. So like, I just don't know how to form a unified opinion here. So that's like, and Rashbatz is not the only one, but there were a bunch of commentators here who like, Rashi, we see, okay, dikduk psak Talmid Chachamim, Rabbeinu Yonah, common errors, Meiri, readiness. But this I don't know. Yeah, Tamar?
This doesn't really answer the whole thing, but maybe you can say it's something in the direction of like not treating it as like high stakes in a certain way. Like if you're making like a bomb or something, right? Like something where like you wouldn't be a little bit lax about one of your ingredients.
That's good. Okay, I like that. Okay, it's like Rashbatz. Is like, do I really recognize the high stakes we're dealing with here? Okay, and I'll just make a note here. That's why Rashbatz doesn't seem to have a unified type of mistake or caution. Oh, sorry, mistake. But all his examples point to the high stakes of again, all of his examples, but his examples point to the high stakes in learning. That's good, and that is sufficiently different from the other four. Okay, so the takeaways, let's just review the takeaways and then we'll stop. Takeaways are, according to Rashi, you should be medactic, okay? Should you be medactic in psak, okay? And should it, you know, I should add that. If I'm giving psak, am I being medactic? Okay. And maybe my idea works, maybe it doesn't, but what I'm claiming is that this is not just a rehash of Rabbeinu Yonah in a more specific way where like you should be careful because otherwise, you know, you should know better and it's on you. I'm saying that according to Rashi, then a posek who sanctions actions that are against halacha based on his own negligence is producing intentional mazid sinners into the world, who don't know any better. And that's analogous to the people who raise kids in propaganda and like supply the intentionality to them. They're producing more of these people in the world, and you can't call that kid, the kid is a tinuk shenishba, literally, right? That it's not like they weighed the factors and were capable of evaluating it and then intentionally decided to like, you know, take this evil stance. It's that an adult who should be responsible, like set them on that course and supply the intentionality. And if it weren't for the adult doing that, they wouldn't even be doing this. The kid wouldn't be doing this. Same thing here is if it weren't for this negligent posek, then this, you know, average person would not be acting against halacha. But now he is, and that's bad for the system. Rabbeinu Yonah is saying that you should just take stock and realize people make mistakes, errors are common, human nature is to err, and if I'm in one of those areas, I have to check myself, you know? Yeah, Lauren?
I just thought of this example because in Masoret, Rabbi Nan has been talking about this example about the Muncie went to chickens, how there was a guy who said all these chickens were kosher, and then it turns out they weren't kosher, and he was selling lots of not kosher chickens, and they were talking about whether or not you need to do tshuva for that or not, like the regular people.
Interesting.
And anyway, he was kind of saying that like you don't need to do like real tshuva about your sin. You need to think about like your attitude towards that sin. So I guess I'm just, maybe it doesn't fit exactly, but I guess like it could affect the whole system of the community because everybody realized, well, I just did the sin and it didn't affect me. So now
yeah,
what,
right.
you know?
So I'll give you another example. All right. Let's say someone paskins in not an area of your idea, but choshen mishpat, and like in matters of money. And some negligent posek says that, oh yeah, you're allowed to like to do this and like, you know, to like write this off of your taxes or whatever, you know. So now a bunch of people are going to be going around engaging in something that is actually unjust, let's say, or is actually causing losses, and they're doing it intentionally, gleefully even, because they're gaining from it. And halakha said, the rabbi said it's okay. But now that's really on him, you know, like he produced those mazid actors.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's a better example.
Yeah, I think it's a better example also. Yeah, no, I shouldn't have given the I think that's where I was like unconsciously trying to get at with the kid like who's like been brainwashed. But yeah, like there's real harm in the world is what I'm trying to get at. Okay, according to the Meiri, the question you have to ask yourself is, am I ready in this area, or not even in this area, like ready right now, or do I need to brush up on this? And then the Rashbatz is saying like Torah is high stakes. You know, do I really realize that? Okay, so that is what I got for this this very short mishnah here. Hopefully this was a useful thing. We did answer all of our questions in some way or another. I didn't go through with other people aside from Rashi, but yeah. Okay, so Bli Neder next week should be good. The week after is a Connecticut week, so I will probably not give shiur on Thursday night then, but next week should be good. Okay, have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
Shabbos.